Firstly, I'd just like to welcome everybody to this pilot for assistive technology training within our sector. And just for a tiny bit of background, as we're all aware of the importance of utilising technology for people with a visual impairment, for access to information services, greater financial control, communication, interacting with others, greater productivity and kind of day-to-day tasks. What we want is people with a vision impairment to do exactly the same things as we all have to do now with technology. So this was initially proposed by the Vision Partnership Tech Forum, and they recognised an important factor for getting people with a visual impairment to utilise technology was to build up the knowledge, skills and understanding of assistive technology for people who interact and support people with a visual impairment in the UK. So what we want to do is start some sessions that build up on that knowledge with the hope that we can extend and build on it as we go in the future. So firstly, I'd just like to introduce the people who will be delivering the sessions. So in alphabetical order, we've got Jamie Bruce from Guide Dogs. Morning, Jamie.
Morning, Andrew. Morning, everyone. Hi there.
Yeah.
How you doing? I'm from Guide Dogs, and I am a VRS, a vision rehabilitation specialist, with, I guess, a bit of a special kind of focus of my job is on technology as well.
Cheers, Jamie. And then we've got Matthew from the Braillists. Morning, Matthew.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name's Matthew Horspool. As Andrew says, I'm from the Braillists Foundation, which suggests an emphasis on Braille. I also work as an independent assistive technology trainer, largely in the workplace, but I also do a little bit of work with Coventry Vision Hub, working with home users. So got a very broad background in terms of technology and in terms of the users who I work with.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. And then we've got Richard Powell from Henshaws.
Morning, everybody. I'm Richard from Henshaws. I've been working with assistive technology now for nearly 20 years, but my role at the moment with Henshaws is about assistive technology for visually impaired people, so promoting accessibility and also showing people how to use the technology.
Richard, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. So when it comes to technology, we've all got something in common. We all use technology. We might not always think of what we use as technology, but it's there in pretty much everything we do. So, for example, when you make yourself a coffee, you use a kettle. That's technology. When you listen to the radio, that's technology. When you unlock your phone with your fingerprint or ask Alexa for the weather, I hope nobody's got Alexa in the background there, or tap your card on a bus. That's all technology. Technology is simply a tool that helps us achieve a task. If I wasn't using technology, I'd need to build a fire just to make myself a coffee. Personally speaking, using a kettle is much easier. And for someone with sight loss, technology is no different. In fact, it often becomes more important because it helps people with sight loss accomplish everyday tasks. And in many cases, it can be the difference between relying on others and doing something independently. When we talk about assistive technology, people often imagine very specialist, very expensive equipment. And absolutely that exists. But assistive technology is actually across a wide spectrum. On the one end, you've got mainstream technology, the same devices everybody else uses. And on the other end, you've got specialist devices specifically designed for visually impaired people. And in the middle, you've got a range of tools that overlap both worlds. All of these can be empowering. All of them can support independence, and the right choice depends entirely on the person, their confidence, their lifestyle, their budget, and their preferences. Let me give you an example. I met a lad called Michael. He'd just spent £3,000 on a set of Envision glasses. And vision glasses are, for those that don't know, artificially intelligence powered smart glasses that read text, recognize objects and faces, and they describe a user's surroundings out loud. They're good, but they do rely on a smartphone to work. Michael didn't have a smartphone. He didn't want one. He didn't feel confident using one. So for him, these glasses were a £3,000 ornament. A much better fit would have been the Orcam, which is a completely standalone device and works straight out of the box. And that's why understanding the person is sometimes more important than understanding the technology. The best device in the world is useless if it doesn't fit the person's needs. So for some specific examples across the spectrum, talking book players are a great place to start. Some people love dedicated players like the RNIB Accord or the Victor Reader Stream. They're tactile, they're easy to use, they're designed for people who don't want lots of menu. They just want to press play and go. But others are perfectly happy using mainstream devices like a smart speaker or a mobile phone. Both options are valid. It's about what feels comfortable and intuitive for the person. Document readers are another good example. Specialist device might give brilliant text-to-speech at the press of a button. It's simple, it's reliable, it's purpose-built. But a smartphone app can do the same thing, sometimes better, using the camera and AI. Because people often already own a smartphone, it can also be a much more affordable solution. Navigation is a big one. The Stellar Trek is a specialist GPS device designed specifically for blind pedestrians. It gives a very detailed walking instructions, and it's built with tactile buttons and speech output. But someone else might prefer a mainstream sat-nav or Google Maps on their phone. It depends on confidence, complexity, and on what the person wants to achieve. Again, there's no right or wrong, there's only what works for the individual. Smart canes like the WeWalk add features like obstacle detection or GPS integration. They don't replace mobility training, but they can enhance confidence for some users. And then we've got smart glasses, Envision or Orcam, and now even Meta glasses. They can read text aloud, describe scenes, recognize faces, and give hands-free access to information. They're not for everyone. They require confidence and in some cases a smartphone, but for the right person, they can be genuinely life-changing. But there are also times when mainstream devices have a huge positive impact on the sight loss world. Think of the Alexa. It was designed for the masses, but because it's voice activated and audio based, it's incredibly accessible. Visually impaired people can use it in exactly the same way as sighted people. The Meta glasses, originally designed for quick photo and video sharing on social media, have become a surprisingly powerful accessibility tool. They offer features similar to Envision or Orcam, but at a fraction of the price. But one of the biggest shifts over the last decade or so is that the smartphone can replace a whole bag of specialist devices. A phone can be a magnifier, a document reader, a GPS device, a talking book player, a colour detector, a money reader, all in one simple device. Maybe not so simple. That doesn't mean specialist devices aren't useful. They absolutely are, but it does mean that people have more choice. If somebody already owns a smartphone, they already have the equipment they need. So that's the general landscape for assistive technology, from kettles to smart glasses and everything in between. It's all about matching the right tool to the right person. I'm going to pass over to Jamie now, who's going to go into a bit more detail about specialist versus mainstream tech. Thank you.
So thanks, Richard. To reiterate what you were saying there, in terms of technology, and I think technology in the vision impaired world is very much specialist technology or mainstream technology, and there's there's a conflict there, I guess, between them. Specialist is, I mean, I guess there's a legacy in the specialist technology that people have and use from the very, from the very basic things that we get for, like, the talking book players, which are going right back to when they were cassettes and then CDs and now Daisy players. So that's a really good example of how the specialist technology has come and developed, and maybe one of the reasons why someone might want to have a piece of specialist assistive tech rather than something that was more mainstream. I mean, a Daisy player, for example, which you've got lovely, big, easy to see, easy to feel tactile buttons and a lot of control over your listening experience. Able to add bookmarks with ease, and you can send, and people like to have the form, like the actual physical device, the physical CD to put in the machine and play it. Moving on to now having USBs and stuff like that. But still, again, specialist over mainstream. Mainstream idea would be you could just download it on an iPhone or an iPad and listen to it. I think it's like with that, the unique features that a specialist product has, which makes it that appealing, and also it's built for purpose, which makes it appealing to someone. The idea as well that when Richard mentioned the Stellar Trek for a navigation tool, it being specialist assistive technology, it is solely designed for the use of people with a vision impairment. Therefore, it's just going to be used for. It's only got the walking feature. It's walking around, and it's giving the turn-by-turn directions over just walking rather than confusing with driving or having to use Google Maps with maybe the kind of the more detailed and things that you've got to put into something like that. The reason that I guess the reason that some people would be ending up with the specialist, the more sort of niche market thing, which again is obviously more expensive and things, is that the thought that maybe the knowledge and maybe the idea that something like a smartphone or a tablet or something that's mainstream is they can't use it anymore. Having lost their sight, it becomes useless to them. So they have to just sort of get something with big buttons. That's the kind of the conceit that people have in their head and things. The idea that something that would be maybe more mainstream, not maybe just from themselves, but I guess friends and family with the best will in the world might be saying, well, here's my dad's losing his sight. He's now no longer going to be able to use his phone. We're going to have to get him a piece of equipment that he can use. So people will, inevitably throw money at something to help their loved ones and end up maybe with the best will in the world, the best intentions, but maybe just not that information to support. I mean, I could count the amount of people. I've seen so many people who, having lost their sight, have ended up with like a big button, a Doro phone, and in the drawer is an iPhone that they once had, but they just don't think they can use it anymore because nobody's sort of picked up that baton and ran with it for them. And I think the idea, and there's always a place for specialized equipment in that it is simple, it's built for purpose. If you're using a digital magnifier or a desktop magnifier using the OCR, the optical character recognition, it's going to do the job, but it's going to do the job well, and it's going to be very simple and easy to use, as opposed to the same app on a phone or a tablet where you're going to have to know how to work the tablet and have that little bit of knowledge. It's maybe a bit of a steeper learning curve to use the mainstream equipment. However, specialist equipment is by its nature a niche product and therefore more expensive. Using something which would be more mainstream, and examples that we're going to go on and talk about in the next sort of sessions, we're going to look at sort of smartphones and things. So if you think about that, the mainstream product by its nature again is more available to everyone. So it's mass market, it's mass produced, the price is going to be lower. As I say, there's a steeper learning curve to it, but it's our job to educate people in knowing what exists and how they can use it. Again, going back to like times where I've met people, like when I worked in hospitals at the point of registration, and they're not using their phone anymore because they don't know about the accessibility features. So having that knowledge, and this is the knowledge that we've got to spread around and build up so that everyone gets to know it, is essential. And I think as well, the idea that a mainstream product being affordable and accessible, because accessibility is built into pretty much, well, it's built into every mainstream item that you can get, from your smartphones right through to, you go into any modern television and you go into the settings menu, you're going to find accessibility in the menu, and you'll be able to change the settings to make that some way accessible. The accessibility features are going to vary on from device to device. So yeah, I think that the idea of specialist versus mainstream is still going to be there. It's always going to be there, and there's going to be a reason for specialist product. But just to go back again to how Richard ended it, is that the knowledge of what the person needs, and whether or not do you really need to spend up to £1,000 on a digital magnifier when it's only going to do one thing, do it well, but only one thing, where for the same money you could buy a smartphone which will do everything that you need. And that's kind of how our thoughts are going in the way that, that these sessions are going to lead us. And I'm going to hand now over to Matthew.
All right, brilliant. Thanks very much. Good morning again, everybody. So, as you've probably gathered by now, we're going to be talking a lot about smartphones during this course over the next few weeks. And Jamie and Richard have already talked a lot about the reasons for that, namely that a smartphone is fairly ubiquitous. There are people who still don't have smartphones, but there are a lot of people now who do have smartphones. Compared to things like laptops, I think people in general find smartphones fairly easy to use. There's obviously there's the whole thing of getting over the fact that you're a blind person and you're using a touch screen, and that can feel a bit jarring for some people. But once you've got over that, I mean, it's a slab of glass. There's only so much you can do on it versus a keyboard on a laptop, which might have, you know, millions of buttons. You've got to try and work out which button is which. So the smartphone is really what we're going to be concentrating on. The reason why this course is so important, just sort of going back to what Jamie was saying about mainstream versus specialist technology, I think the one thing that can't be understated about the specialist technology is that if you're buying specialist technology, you should be getting specialist support with that specialist technology. So the advantage of a smartphone is that if your smartphone goes wrong, you can take it into a phone shop and you can say to the phone shop, look, my phone's gone wrong, can you fix it? And they probably will be able to fix it, but they won't have any understanding of the accessibility overlay that's been put on it. So they won't understand VoiceOver or TalkBack or Zoom or what have you. And so if you've got a phone with VoiceOver on and the gestures have all changed, the person in the phone shop isn't necessarily going to know why the gestures are changed and how to get out of that mode in order to fix the phone. If we go back to the days of specialist technology, that wasn't something that we as visually impaired people used to have to deal with. We would be able to call whoever sold us the product, whether that was RNIB or Sight and Sound or Humanware or whoever it was, and we'd be able to say, look, it's not working, and they would automatically understand, okay, this person's visually impaired, so they can't see lights. This person, the screen is, you know, there's no screen, so we're going to have to listen to the speech output. All of that is going to be universally understood by the specialist manufacturers in a way that it's not going to be understood by the mainstream manufacturers. So it's really important that we, as the professionals, understand how the accessibility on these devices works, so that when somebody has a problem, they've got another line of support beyond the phone shop who might be able to help replace a battery, but might not necessarily be able to help with some of the nuances of the accessibility of phones. The other thing I just want to talk about is the fact that we're not necessarily, although we're limiting ourselves to phones in this course, they're not the only game in town. So if we go back to talking about computers, there are screen readers and screen magnification programs available. So we're talking about things like JAWS and Zoom Text and Fusion and Supernova for Windows, VoiceOver and Zoom for the Mac. You can get screen readers for Linux. You can get screen readers for Chromebooks. We've talked about the relative complexity of using a QWERTY keyboard if you've lost your sight later in your life and you weren't previously a touch typist. Some people will lose their sight and be very familiar with touch typing. Some people will lose their sight, they're a bit younger, and actually they want to get back into the workplace, or they want to have just a little bit more autonomy and don't want to be, limited to just using a phone, because when they were sighted, they used a mix of a phone and a tablet and a computer. And why shouldn't they use a computer just because they've lost their sight? So this technology is important, even though we're not going to talk about it too much in this course. And it's amazing, actually, if we talk about screen readers on computers, they can provide access to most first and third party applications. So we're not just limited to Microsoft Office on Windows, for example. You can use whatever Windows program you like. Most of the time, it's going to work. For visually impaired people of working age or visually impaired people at school or in education, learning to use a computer with assistive technology is absolutely vital for returning to the workplace. I don't think a workplace would take you very seriously if you turned up with just a phone and said, well, this is how I'm going to live my life now. There are things that are just not going to be possible or not going to be very efficient. And that likewise, if you're going back to do study and you need to upload your assignments using a virtual learning environment and type your assignments out and do footnote referencing and things like that, you might find that even if a phone can do it, it's a bit limiting. So computers are valuable. We've already talked about things like televisions and set-top boxes. Many of these now have accessibility features built in. It will be called different names. I've heard it called TalkBack if your TV's based on Android, Voice Guide, Voice View. There's any number of things, but it's there. So have a look at the manual for your TV, and you should find some information there. And I should just say, we're not just talking about audio description. Audio description is very useful. So audio description is where you'll have a program on the TV and a narrator has recorded a separate track to go along with that says, a person walks into the room, she's wearing all black, or whatever it happens to be. That's audio description. Most TVs above and beyond audio description will have a screen reader in to read the menus or to read the electronic program guide or things like that. We talked about Alexa earlier on. Smart home technology such as thermostats, lights and doorbells, and even some home appliances now. These can be huge for accessibility. You think of most thermostats now. I mean, how many thermostats do you know that have a touch screen? And you can try and put bump-ons on the touch screen to try and make sense of it. But actually, if you can get somebody using a smartphone app or even a smart speaker to control their central heating system or to control their lights, that may very well be very empowering for them. The downside of that, of course, is that not everybody wants to have a smart home. Some people don't want their home to be constantly connected to the internet. In that instance, going back to specialist versus mainstream, this is where specialist products do sometimes come into their own. There's a company called Cobalt Systems Limited, and they actually supply a number of specialist products where, yes, okay, there might be a smart home alternative, but for privacy reasons or any number of other reasons, they don't want their home on the internet. You could buy a talking thermostat from Cobalt. You could buy some talking bathroom scales from Cobalt if you didn't want to use a pair of smart bathroom scales, for example. You could buy, okay, let's talk about the kitchen, microwaves and things like that. A talking microwave is very expensive. A talking microwave will set you back £200, £300 or something. And you think, why on earth would I want to spend £300 on a talking microwave when I could just buy a cheap microwave for £50 and put some bump-ons on it. Actually, both are valid. But if you're in a family household, let's say you've got very young children in the household that like to fidget around and that might like to pick the bump-ons off the microwave, maybe constantly reapplying bump-ons to your microwave is getting a bit tiring. And you just think, do you know what? I know it's more expensive, but there's some security there in having a talking microwave. There's some security in having a talking air fryer, all of those sorts of things. So don't write off the specialist products straight away in situations like that. At the extreme end of specialist products, and going back to what we were saying at the beginning, the fact that I'm from the Braillists Foundation, there is a marrying of Braille and technology, and this primarily happens through products called refreshable Braille displays. These are usually one line of Braille. We are starting to see products which have more than one line of Braille now, and it's basically if you imagine a Braille cell is 3 rows deep and it's 2 columns wide, so you'd have like maybe 20 or 40 cells, so you'd have 3 or 4 lines of pins, and those pins pop up and down and show one line of Braille of whatever's on your computer or on your smartphone or on your tablet, or whatever the Braille display is connected to. It can connect to a lot of things nowadays. They can usually connect via USB or Bluetooth, and they are really useful if, let's say, you've got somebody who has lost their sight and is also losing their hearing. Of course, you've got to learn Braille before you can use a Braille display. But actually, for somebody who just can't understand synthetic speech for whatever reason, maybe it's to do with hearing loss, maybe it's to do with auditory processing issues, maybe it's just to do with the fact that actually, do you know what, they've done enough listening to everything else, they don't want to have to listen to somebody or a robot talking to them. This would be a good opportunity to have a Braille display connected and they can read what's happening instead of listen to it. The downside, of course, it's very expensive. The cheapest Braille display sets you back about £600, and that's an Orbit reader and is quite noisy. Typically, Braille displays, you're looking at probably £1,500 plus, and for a good quality 40 cell display, which is kind of an average line of reading, you're probably looking at about £3,000. So it's a considered investment, and as I say, I think learn Braille before you splash out on a Braille display, but they are very useful. They also often include a Braille or a QWERTY keyboard, most often a Braille keyboard. And what some manufacturers have started to do is actually realize that the Braille input part is in some ways more useful than the Braille output part, or certainly of equal use to the Braille output part. And you can sell a Braille keyboard much more cheaply than you can sell a Braille display because you haven't got the moving parts of the pins popping up and down. So again, going back to the mainstream versus specialist argument, one of the reasons why you might choose not to use a smartphone, or why you might choose to use a specialist smartphone like the Blind Shell Classic or something like that, is that you're not comfortable using a touchscreen. And that might be because you're not comfortable using a touchscreen. It might also be because actually you physically can't use a touchscreen. If you've got a tremor or something like that and you can't control whether you're tapping the screen or sliding your finger across the screen, or you can't control whereabouts on the screen you're tapping, a touchscreen may actually be physically impossible to use or very difficult to use. So we fall back to those specialist devices. Another route might be to learn how to write Braille, even if you don't know how to read Braille. And then you could use a little Braille keyboard. There are 2 of them on the market at the moment. There's the Orbit Writer, which costs I don't know, about £100 or something, and there's something called the Hable One, which costs about £150, £160, and those devices will just connect via Bluetooth to your phone, and you can write in Braille on them, and you can also control the touchscreen with them. So it's a bit like having a remote control for your phone. And in fact, the Hable actually comes in 2 forms. There's the Hable One and there's the Hable Easy, and the Hable Easy is literally a remote control. You have a dedicated button for home, you have a dedicated button for the next and the previous item. You have a dedicated button to select an item, to tap on an item, a dedicated button to turn the volume up and down and to play and pause and so on. So those devices, although we're not going to talk about them, can come in very, very useful. So hopefully that's given you a sort of broad brush overview. I'm happy to talk in more detail about any of this in the question and answer session, which we'll come to shortly. But for now, I'm going to turn back to Richard to talk more about some of the low vision aspects and the screen and the environment and things like that.
Thank you, Matthew. I'll just unpin you and then add Richard again.
Thank you, Matthew. That was a lot of detail. Just conscious that quite often we seem to give out lots and lots of information, and quite often people are thinking they're sitting there thinking, we've got to remember all this. The reality is you don't. This is just about giving you an impression about some of the options. We will kind of narrow it all down over the next few sessions, specifically around mobile phones and accessibility. But it's more important to just understand the main concepts than necessarily all the detail about what we've talked about today. Having said that, I'm going to shift focus again and talk about screens and environments. And again, these are just considerations. If somebody says, oh, I can't see the screen because it's too bright, for example, something that I've said might come back to you about a couple of options. So that's the idea of today, not about just overloading you with facts that you just can't remember. Okay, so the device itself is not the whole story. It's quite often about screens and environments as well. So the way somebody uses it, the environment they're using it in, can make just as much difference as the actual technology itself. Two people could have exactly the same device, but their experience could be completely different depending on how it's set up and where they're using it. So we'll start with the screen size. Bigger screens are easier to see for the most part. The bigger, they can have bigger letters. It's a fairly obvious advantage. A larger phone or a larger tablet gives you more space for magnification, bigger text, clearer layouts. But for somebody who uses large print or needs to zoom a lot, that extra space can be incredibly helpful. But there are trade-offs. Larger screens are heavier, they're less portable. There's more room to get lost on the screen. If somebody already struggles navigating a touch screen, a big screen could feel like a big field with no landmarks. They might swipe and tap and throw it out the window, but not find what they're looking for. So for some people, a smaller device is actually easier because everything is closer together. The buttons are nearer, the menus feel tighter, they can navigate it more predictably. It's a bit like knowing your way around a small kitchen versus being put in a huge kitchen and not understanding where you are. There's fewer places to lose things in a small kitchen. So when we're talking about, when we're supporting someone, it's not always about bigger is better. It's about what works for that person. It's about what works in their hands. The right screen size isn't the one we use. The right screen size is the one that gives them the confidence. It's not the one that necessarily looks best on paper. A big question I quite often get asked is, should I use a smartphone or a tablet? And the honest answer, it depends. Smartphone is portable. It's always with you. It's great for quick tasks, checking a message, using a magnifier, asking Siri or Google something, or taking a photo of a document. It's always in your pocket. It's quite often a part of your daily routine. But a tablet, on the other hand, you've got more space. Can be brilliant for magnification, can be much easier for reading books, doing emails, browsing the internet, or making video calls. The larger screen can reduce eye strain and make text easier to follow. But tablets can be harder to hold, harder to carry. And sometimes just because it's big or bigger can be a bit overwhelming for new users. If somebody's already nervous about technology, handing them a big glowing device can make it feel like too much. And if you've got limited dexterity or fatigue easily, the weight of the tablet can also be a barrier. So again, it's about matching the device with the person's need, confidence and lifestyle. Tablet might be perfect for someone who reads a lot at home. A smartphone might be better for someone who wants something simple and portable. And sometimes the best solution is a combination of both, depending on what your use case is. Moving away from screens, we've got the environment. This is quite often something that gets overlooked, but it can make or break somebody's experience with technology. Lighting can make a huge difference. If you've got the sun glaring on your screen, it becomes harder to see, even with magnification or zoom. Some people with sight loss are also sensitive to light, while others might need as much light as possible. Sometimes simply turning the person away from the window or moving a lamp can transform their experience. Adjusting the screen brightness or switching to dark mode can also help. Tiny changes, but it can make the device feel very different. Noise levels is another matter. If somebody relies on speech output, put them on a noisy environment and it makes the device unusable. Imagine trying to listen to a voiceover or talkback in a busy cafe or on the trams in Manchester where it's very noisy. It's frustrating and it can knock someone's confidence. Headphones can help, especially bone conduction headphones that keep the ears open, but sometimes the simplest solution is just moving to a quiet area. It's amazing how often a problem isn't necessarily the device, it's the environment. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about is posture. Holding a device too close or too far away or at an awkward angle can cause fatigue. If somebody's straining to see the screen or holding the device in a way that's uncomfortable, they're going to give up on that device sooner. A stand could help, a case with a grip, even just sitting at a table can make the difference. And for some people, using a stylus instead of their fingers can give them more accuracy or control. Comfort also matters. If somebody's comfortable, they're more likely to explore, experiment and build confidence. If they're uncomfortable, they'll avoid using the device. So when we're supporting people, it's not just about the device, it's about the whole environment, the lighting, the noise, the posture, the screen size, confidence, and small adjustments can make a huge difference to somebody's independence. Two people can have the same phone, the same settings, same apps, but one thrives while the other one struggles. Often it's the difference between the difference isn't the technology, it's the setup, it's the environment. What we're trying to achieve over the next few weeks is not about bringing you up to being a complete tech expert. All it is about giving you the confidence and hopefully some of the skills to help the people that you're already supporting. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is a tiny change on somebody's device, and that can unlock a whole wealth of independence. So as we're working with people, keep an eye on the whole picture. The device is important, but the environment around them is also important. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Andrew just for the final bit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. That's really interesting, and thanks Matthew and Jamie as well. Yeah, I often think about a bit of research that I read where it was one of the barriers or one of the effects of technology particularly for elderly people is if something goes wrong, then it might only need to go wrong once for them then to just stuff it in the drawer and think I'm never ever going to use it again. So it's kind of us within the sector and us when we're working and supporting people is just thinking about how can we avoid all those little pratfalls that might go wrong. And as you were saying, Richard, really interested around actually the environment and the setup and the posture, Because if you start using something and then suddenly you get neck pain, it's like, I'm never using that again. Or, you know, or if you're sitting and trying to use it and the lighting's not correct and you suddenly can't see the screen, is that enough to stop you from ever using that device again? So it's really important that we think about all these factors as we're supporting and we're working with people. So that's really great. I just before we go to Q&As from everybody, I'll give you a minute to think if you've got any questions. I've just got one kind of question or ask for the three of you. Have you got an example you're happy to share about a person that you've supported in terms of technology and kind of the impact that it's had on their lives? So if Richard, Matthew, or Jamie, you've got anything you'd like to share, is that okay?
I'm happy to start.
Oh yeah, thanks, Richard.
So I met a lady called Janie, and to give you an idea about Janie, she was 86 when I first worked with her. She was a former music teacher at secondary school. She was one of those teachers with that really authoritative voice that even makes me quake in my boots when I met her the first time. She was one of those kind of teachers. But she'd lost all her confidence because of macular degeneration. The way she wanted to organise her shopping was she phoned up a local convenience store. She phoned through her order and they would deliver it to her. And if she needed any bits and pieces, the way she would do it, she would text her neighbour, and her neighbour would be able to call by a corner shop on the way home or something. But because of her macular degeneration, she wasn't able to actually see the text messages or see the keyboard. She had an old Doro clamshell phone. So she wasn't able to text her neighbours or because her macular degeneration had got so bad she couldn't see what she was doing properly. So when I met her, I introduced her to a synaptic phone.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I always consider synaptic kind of the halfway house between a full-on smartphone and a basic phone. And because of the larger letters, because of the speech, it meant she was able to continue doing those text messages to her neighbours. But what's more, it went even further, that one time when I spoke to her, she'd had a text message from her GP practice about flu vaccination, which she'd missed for the past couple of years because she'd not been able to read her text messages. But it meant that because she was able to access that text message, she was able to organise her flu jab and keep herself safe. So that's just one example that made a huge change.
Brilliant, thank you, Richard. Matthew and Jamie, have got an example you'd like to share? Or...
Sure, I could jump in if you want.
Yeah, cheers, Jamie.
So, I mean, we're talking about how technology's changed people, but also how technology's changed my work and my day-to-day with people and how I work with them. Pretty much, in fact, definitely 100% of people who I'm seeing in my role as a VRS, going out to visit them, 100% of those visits have got technology incorporated into that visit in one way or another. When a good example, I guess, would be going out to do a route. So it was a fairly complicated route with this person who had no vision at all, quite a competent long cane user. So it was basically just there was wasn't like teaching long cane skills. It was just this big long complex route, which I think it was a good mile and a half to 2 miles, the whole route in its entirety. And I went from a train station round through into a busy town centre, and then along in various turns. We had to go past the churchyard and across some crossings, and then up a housing estate. So it was from train centre to a ski centre. So that was, as I say, a really complex route. We built the route up, we walked it again. I broke it down into its component parts, and we sort of chunked it out, did one bit, and then we were trying to string them all together. And it was just you know, for whatever reason, there was parts where like the person, they knew every part of the route, they could do every part individually, but trying to run it all together just for whatever reason just did not work. So linking in with a smartphone and an app for a navigation app. In this case, it was it was Voice Vista. In this case, and by running Voice Vista and getting information through bone conducting headphones, open ear, it was then that information was the person was able to string to do the route and knowing where they were became a lot easier to run that route together, and we probably were able to complete and finish the route in half as many sessions as we would have without the tech. And then getting that skill and using that application for navigation and for that information made that person much more confident, and were able to then go and build their own routes, and even ended up doing spontaneous travel on their own. So it really does help, as well as helping the person. Obviously, that's the end result, but it does help us in terms of the job we do and making it maybe quicker to complete.
Yeah, cheers, Jamie. That's really interesting. Thank you. And have you got anything, Matthew? You don't have to. I was just.
All right. I have. If I could be really cheeky, actually, and share two, because they share slightly different aspects of the situation. So, as I said, I work a lot with people of working age, and because I'm working with people of working age, I'm working with them actually either in the workplace, or actually I used to do quite a lot of work with students at university, and so I've got a working age one and I've got a university one. From the working age one was a really interesting one. His name was Andy. He worked in the NHS, and he was sighted and was gradually losing his vision. And as he was gradually losing his vision, the workplace had made various reasonable adjustments. So started off with a bigger screen and then moved on to Zoom text to put magnification onto that bigger screen, and then moved on to Fusion, which is a combination of Zoom text and JAWS, so that he could have magnification and speech. But no one had really taught him how to use the speech. And so he was really trying really hard to access quite complicated stuff. He was not unfamiliar with computers, but he was in a project management role, so he was having to use lots of tracker spreadsheets that were very wide. He was having to use lots of project management dashboards, CRM type systems, and he was trying to use an overview page of a CRM system dashboard with magnification on. And even though the screen was very big, it was still that situation where only a small amount of the dashboard could be seen on the screen. And so you could maybe see the top left-hand corner, and then you had to pan around to find the center, and then pan down a little bit further to find the bottom right-hand corner, and so on. And when I very first met Andy, the very first thing he said was, gosh, I don't think we're going to be able to do, because workplace training, we tend to do it in 3-hour blocks. He said, I don't think we're going to be able to do a full 3-hour block, because to be honest with you, we were training in the afternoon. He said, to be honest with you, I'm already exhausted from the morning, and I just don't see how I'm going to be able to do a full day. And I said, well, how common is this? And he said, well, it's very common. You know, I can't manage a full day. If I try and do a full day, I come home exhausted and I'm just falling asleep, and I can't, you know, but my evenings are right off. And we did some experimenting with various different things to do with the setup and things like that. Ultimately, we came to the conclusion after a lot of back and forth that actually the problem was trying to use vision, which had deteriorated to such an extent that it wasn't perhaps as useful as perhaps people thought it was. And what we actually did was turn the screen off completely. I said, well, look, you know, you're familiar with computers, you're familiar with typing. Why don't we just turn off the screen completely, get rid of the mouse, use keyboard shortcuts to do everything? And I mean, that wouldn't necessarily work with everybody, but in this case, he was up for the challenge, and so we did. And we came back the following week to do his second training session, and he said, oh, do you know what, actually just not looking at things, just listening to things a bit more, has has given me back that sort of that overview that I've been missing from using a magnifier, where you had to kind of pan around all the time. All of a sudden, you're not having to pan around anymore. And so there's the very liberating, actually not using vision and going all the way over to speech and just using the technology like that. Means that the eyes are freed up to do things that the eyes want to do, like, you know, when you're crossing the road, look out for oncoming vehicles, and the ears were doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And that for him made the difference between going home absolutely exhausted at the end of the day and going home with energy at the end of the day, so he could spend time with his family and things like that. The other thing I wanted to share really briefly was I also worked with somebody who was at university. Her name was Hannah. She was studying medieval history at university, and she had been blind since birth. So at school, she'd learnt Braille, and she was using a Braille note taker. She was using a Braille Note Touch, as it goes. And her Braille was excellent. Her Braille skills were really good. She had a lot of academic skills. She was able to cope, to keep up with the course and all of that sort of thing. She was all finding it very interesting. And what I was doing with her was actually training her how to create her assignments and upload her assignments into the university's assignment system. And so we'd worked on that training session. And while we were working on that training system session, her phone rang. And it was actually somebody quite important. She'd got I don't think she'd actually got voiceover on her phone at that point. She'd just got Siri reading out who the phone call was from. And it was, I forget who it was, but it was somebody important, like the doctor or the hospital or something like that. And I said, "Oh, are you not going to answer that? This is important. Don't worry about this training session. You've obviously been waiting for this call for a long time." And she said, "Oh, no, I can't answer it. I don't know how. I'm going to have to wait for the call to ring off. And then once I've missed the call, I can then ask Siri to call the person back." Now, bear in mind, this was a quite vulnerable 18-year-old blind child, blind person, blind female person in a big university campus. And all she could do to make calls was to use Siri to make a call. And I just thought, this is not safe. You need to be able to make calls discreetly. You need to be able to use your phone more discreetly than just dictating. And so we managed to finish off what we were there to do our training on. And we spent probably about half an hour, and it only took half an hour, just turning on VoiceOver and doing some really basic gestures. Some of the gestures that we'll talk about in the next session as it goes. But doing those really basic gestures, and again came back the next session and said, "Well, how are you getting on?" And she said, "Oh yeah, the assignment's uploaded," she said, "but the thing that really stuck out from that session was the fact that I can now use my phone." And as part of that, we taught her how to answer a call. So I can actually answer phone calls, and it feels like I'm back on an equal footing. I can actually answer calls as well as make calls, and that really for her made such a difference in her life. And that just goes to show that even if somebody's been blind since birth, you sort of think, oh, if you've been blind since birth, you're going to have an understanding of assistive technology. Actually, your understanding of technology is only as good as the understanding of the person who's taught you. So if you went to mainstream school and the support in mainstream school didn't really understand technology, and you had parents that didn't really understand the technology, actually you're not going to be much further ahead. And so actually even people who've been blind since birth still need that technical support from time to time.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. That's really fantastic to share that. Yeah, and great examples from everybody. But yeah, it's really interesting how technology is kind of giving us two things, isn't it? One about like basic human rights, isn't it, to be able to make a call and to be safe and do that. But then also looking at that productivity of actually, if I use technology well, I can do things a little bit quicker. I can have energy to do other things. And for some people, it might just be that they just have to rely on their family to do everything for them. And that's not productive time, is it? If you can do things for yourself, when your family come around, actually you can just do nice things together, can't you? As opposed to just having to sort out your admin and whatnot. So yeah, they're really fantastic examples. Thank you very much, everybody. So we're just coming to the end of the session. So this now just a Q&A. So if anybody's got any initial questions that you have or any comments that you want to make, please put your hand up or add them to the chat. Hi, Di.
Oh yeah. I've got one. It's just really thank you for everybody for that information and presentations. The one I've got really is around our members, which are predominantly elderly, and memory and smartphones and the process. Do you know what I mean? And so I think we often come across this. We might have somebody who wants to use the smartphone to make a hands-free call, and then they forget the process of how to do it or how to instruct the phone to make that call. Any advice on that, or is that something you're going to cover later on?
We will cover it in subsequent sessions, certainly, and that sort of goes back to what I was saying about why we're talking about smartphones. There's, for some people, there's going to be cognitive issues like that and memory issues. One of the things we like about smartphones is that actually you can do quite a lot by voice commands if you really need to, and sometimes that can be easier to remember than touchscreen gestures and commands and things. But even if you're doing things with touchscreen gestures, actually there's probably only about, half a dozen gestures that you need to remember. And if you can remember those half a dozen gestures, then you'll be able to do everything. Now, it might not be the most efficient way to do something. If you could remember 20 gestures, you might be more efficient than if you can remember 6. But if you can remember 6, then you can do everything that you need to do. And so that's part of the reason why we are actually concentrating on smartphones, because once you get over that initial hurdle of the touchscreen, we tend to find that people can remember the gestures more easily than they can remember lots of different keyboard commands and things like that.
Thank you, Matthew.
Can I just add to that? Most of the people that I see are actually with older people, and they've not been brought up with technology, so technology has been introduced to them, or smart technology has been introduced to them during their life. So I usually start with how they're doing something at the moment, and then try and think of a way of doing that task, or the best way to achieve that task, changing as little as possible. So if I can get away with just increasing the font size, which makes their phone usable for them, I will do that. There are times when the reality is they will have to learn new skills. And that is something that goes hand in hand with losing your sight during your life. That when you were younger, if you've got full vision, you learn to do everything with sight. Making a cup of tea, for example, you learn to pour the kettle into the cup. Using your sight, you can see when it's come to a certain level, so you stop pouring. If you lose your sight later on in life, you've got to change the way you do that, otherwise it becomes unsafe. And sometimes it's about learning to do those processes all over again, which is why I admire older people who are willing to take on the challenge of learning how to do something differently, because it's a big ask for them. And the reality is they've already learned so much because they've had to adapt to living with sight loss from a sighted world.
Yeah. I think another issue that I see as well is as people get older, their sensitivity changes, their skin becomes drier, the connection to the smartphone becomes more difficult. They may have arthritis in their hands, so the gestures are all not easy, but it's just trying to find the solution that works for them with the additional challenges that they have. That's just my last comments. Thank you.
Yeah. I think primarily these sessions are about sight loss, but yes, you're absolutely right. Quite often sight loss goes hand in hand with other things, and somebody with dexterity issues, something as simple as a Bluetooth keyboard. I know it reduces the portability, but a Bluetooth keyboard means they can touch keys use the arrow keys as opposed to using swipe gestures. So there's lots of options.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I talked earlier on about things like the Orbit Writer and the Hable. I don't have a Hable with me. I do have an Orbit Writer. I'll just hold it up to the screen in case you can see that. So, I mean, this is a this is a Braille keyboard, so there's the learning curve of learning Braille, but the Hable looks not dissimilar to that. It's a slightly different form factor. And the Hable Easy, if you imagine all of those Braille buttons would have their own function. So you'd have a button to go to the previous item, a button to go to the next item. So it's nice and small. It would fit into your pocket quite easily alongside your phone, but it would prevent that, need to do everything with a touchscreen and I can't do it with a touchscreen because I've not got the dexterity. Or of course, as I say, go back to something like a Blind Shell Classic, which has buttons, and that's another solution to the problem, of course.
Can I just jump in there? It's just to add to what Diane said. I'm finding, obviously, we've got an older generation as our main cohort of members, that cognitive decline alongside physical decline are the two main barriers I find to most of our members getting into technology in a big way.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, Beck's just put a comment in around when working with elderly people and people with difficulties, sometimes just about repeating sessions, and that's true. Where being repetitive and being consistent can be the right approach for lots of different people. So, thank you for that. Yeah, and I've got Joe. You've got your hand up, Joe Fielder.
Hi, yeah. It's just touching on Di's comment again of the elderly. So a lot of our clients are that way inclined, and we do have the memory issue. Have you guys ever come across clients where you've tried and they're just not getting it? And what do you do in those instances?
Yeah, so yes is a short answer. There are those people. Sometimes there isn't a solution. Got to be realistic. Sometimes there actually isn't a solution. I've met a lady, for example, that wanted to use the internet and send emails, but when I actually asked her what she understood an email was, she thought it was a text message. So the actual, I'm not saying she'd never be able to get there, but the resources we've got to be able to support her to get to that stage wouldn't be practical. The reality is it would have probably taken a year's worth of weekly sessions to get her to that stage, which we just haven't got the resources to do.
Yeah.
So sometimes, unfortunately, the answer is, I'm sorry, we can't help you. If there is any other solution, if there is, for example, I met a lady who just wanted to read her Quran, and we explored the technology options available for her, and she was really struggling with the smartphone. But when Blind Vets got rid of all their CCTVs, their big CCTVs, they passed a few to us, and we had a spare one in the office. We were able to give her that or long-term loan that, which gave her a way of being able to use her Quran, to read her Quran. So sometimes there's not an option. Sometimes there isn't an answer. Sometimes it is the person not willing to engage, which quite often means waiting until they're ready, or saying, suggest you contact us or come back to us when you're if you want to explore these items further. But yeah, it's the hardest thing to say. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I can't think of an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool.
But it's always better to be honest.
To jump in, I've had quite a few people like that with the have elderly and the cognitive decline, and it's very much about personalization and making the device to suit them, even to the point where having like blocked off, like, there was someone who had an iPhone and they just could not use like the magnification or navigate their way around the apps on the phone. Neither were they able to sort of grasp Siri and get to say to vocally call their family or their support network. So on the phone, we've kind of locked off everything on the phone except for just on the screen like large pictures of the people who they wanted to phone. So while they couldn't actually type in a number, remember a number, or go to phone or vocally make a phone call, they could see an image on the screen and tap that image, and then that person they could call their son, who would then be able to support them. Also, putting shortcuts onto the phone, so it's more like getting it so that their circle, their contact, is able to get in touch with them and check in. And that's something that you can do with like automatic answer, so that if they can't answer the phone after so many rings, the phone will answer, and then you're talking to them on speakerphone. So wherever it is, you can talk to them, or using a smart speaker like the Echoes, where you can drop in. So you're not needing them to be able to use the device, but you can still speak to them on the device. So you can have that sort of support there as well.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, and I think also we go back to what we were talking about at the beginning, the difference between, we're talking about like smart technology, but actually there just might be another piece of technology that might be suitable, a more specialist piece of technology. Because if we can break down what the actual task or what the thing is the person is trying to achieve, actually smart technology could be an option, but it's so difficult to learn. It could actually just be easier to, as Richard, you said, the CCTV is the right solution, because actually that just meets the need, isn't it? So like the smart technology is amazing, but for a certain individual, it might not be the best solution for them for a number of factors. So let's not hesitate and go back to something that does work for them. So yeah, and then we've got a couple of comments in the chat from Nicola just talking about using talking tin lids. They're kind of short voice recording devices to help reinforce the process in between any sessions you might be doing with somebody. I suppose you could also provide some written instructions if the person can access that. That's really good. And we put there, Beck, sorry, assistive access and accessibility on iPhone is good for older people who need a simpler device. So yeah, really good. And then Bex, again, you're just talking about maybe just a Doro phone is what you need if somebody's trying to make the call, because actually that's the easiest way of doing it, and for that person. Yeah. And we've got Joe Fullerton, you've got your hand up. Have you got a question?
Hi, yes. On that topic of technology that's simpler, technology for older people, people that might have memory issues, cognitive issues, I think you're all on the right lines, all the things you've been talking about. The idea of simple devices where you just push a button and it speaks to you, you have a recording. You know, you can get the little one button. They're designed for people with learning disabilities and physical disabilities where, you know, they might have limited use of their hands, but they can press a button. So you can record a message on the device, and that can act as a reminder for somebody. You can get clocks and so on like that as well, can't you, where you just press a button and it tells you the time. And I think that when you've got to design a system for an individual, then it's worth getting specialist advice if there are memory issues involved. In Edinburgh and Lothian, the services between the NHS and the council have made a partnership. So for older people, you can get a service through the smart home, and you can have an assessment. So you can access very detailed advice or customized advice in the field of telecare. You know, we haven't mentioned that word, telecare, and that's the technology that's specifically aimed at people who need sort of round the clock monitoring and support, and they may have difficulty using technology, so they need to take their medication at regular intervals. And you know, people need to maybe have some kind of tracking or an option if they fall. They can, you know, so you can have a simple fall alarm, of course, that you just wear around your neck, but the telecare systems are linked to these systems, so you know, you've got a call centre usually at the other end. And often it's a tablet where you just need to maybe tap the screen or speak, and the tablet wakes up, and you don't need to give very complicated, there's no complicated gestures or, you know, the use of the device is very simple. It's designed around the person's needs. So that's that specialist area of telecare, isn't it? It's obviously a bit beyond the scope of the course, you know, but there are devices out there that are suitable. Oh, and just Matthew, you mentioned microwaves and the choice between, say, a talking microwave or one that's inaccessible. But I've got two microwaves, and one has one of those awful flat touch screens, which I think they're really hard to use, and I'm sighted. And I also have a Kenwood, which has a lovely set of physical buttons, and the bottom right button adds 30 seconds and then another 30 seconds.
Yes, thanks for mentioning that. I
And
really
around
appreciate
100,
it.
around 75 to 100 pounds instead of, you know, the more expensive talk. I guess the talking one is the best option all round. If you know, if the extra money can be found. It's choice, though, isn't it? It's about choice.
It is about choice.
You might not
it's
want
about choice. And it's, do you know what? It's about the cognitive load as well. I mean, you're right. So I have to deal with this when one of the things I do is sing in the choir at Coventry Cathedral. We have a microwave in the choir vestry at the cathedral, and very similar idea. You press a button and it adds 30 seconds on.
Yeah.
If somebody's trying to talk to me while I'm adding 30 seconds on, I can lose track of how many times I've pressed that button.
That's
and
true.
So then I'm like, well, actually, am I on 2 minutes or am I on 3 minutes? And actually, in a microwave, the difference between 2 minutes and 3 minutes can actually be quite significant. So for me, actually, a talking microwave, I should say I use a talking microwave. So, you know, and for me, it's about peace of mind. It's not actually about being able to find things, but that peace of mind comes at a huge cost. And I mean, some people, I think people attach value to different things, and actually if we can give people that choice and say, well, actually you can have the peace of mind, it's going to cost you £250, or you can have a slightly easier, a slightly cheaper system where you might not quite get the peace of mind, but you can still use it, and it's going to cost you, as you say, a third of the price. Then people have got that choice and they can make that informed decision. I think what I'd really like to see is professionals giving people that informed choice about things. And certainly my experience of some provision is that some people don't talk about the expensive stuff because I think probably they're a bit embarrassed to talk about the expensive stuff. I certainly find that when I'm working with people, they say, well, how much does this cost? And you have to go, oh, it's about 2,000 or 3,000 actually when you're talking about Braille technology, and it is embarrassing to have to say that. And so I find that people just talk about the solutions that are the more affordable ones. I think that does people a disservice. Actually, I think it's fine to say, look, there is this solution and it costs this much. There is this solution and it costs this much. And whichever one of these solutions you go for, we're here to support you. And actually, most people are probably going to go for the cheaper one, and that's fine. But I think it's really important for the person, for the visually impaired person, where possible, to be making that decision rather than the professional making the decision on behalf of the person.
And it's also interesting how mainstream technology has welcomed, in some ways it's welcomed back the physical button. So my latest iPhone has extra buttons compared to before, even though it doesn't have a home key. It's got lots of buttons at the side. I can turn the camera on with the button. I can turn VoiceOver on and off with the side button. And I can also access my bank card using the same side button as you use for VoiceOver. So 3 presses for VoiceOver and 2 presses for my bank card for Apple Pay. And obviously also it has facial recognition. So paying with my bank card is very, very quick and easy. And I can do it without looking at the screen at all. I actually find it quite confusing sometimes that there are so many buttons, but I think all humans, we actually respond to buttons very well. So sometimes when something has no buttons, that does make it more of a mystery, doesn't it? So, you know, it's just interesting. You get a balance these days often between the two.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just want to move on because Jason Scott, you've had your hand up for a while. So, Jason, I'll leave over to you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I just wanted to give a little shout out to talking about simpler devices for people to use. I just wanted to give a little shout out to the Alexa, which we've long been sort of using for help supporting people to make and receive calls. And the great thing is that you don't necessarily need to be a smartphone user to do that. All you've got to do is set it up. You don't even have to have a SIM card in it. You can set their contacts up on a smartphone, just one that's been kind of cast aside, even take the SIM card out and throw it in the drawer and it still works. And now with the new edition of the Alexa Plus, I've been doing a little bit of playing around with the one I've bought, which is an Echo Show 5, and it works really well for reading and describing, as well as all those other things. It's a lot more intuitive, a lot easier to talk to. Kind of, you can have almost a conversation with it. But the really good thing is that once it's set up, you could just use that by sticking a letter or a product in front of it and saying, you know, Alexa, read, look at this and read it to me.
Thanks,
That's
Jason.
it.
That's really good. Right. So Di, you got your hand up quick.
Yeah, can you give us a demo on that, Jason? In a separate one.
Yeah, I could do, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Book him in, Andrew, quick.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think yeah, I must
also add in there actually that I didn't discover all that. That was sort of brought by one of our DIT colleagues, Scott. But the other thing to mention is that it's Alexa Plus is free with Amazon Premier, yeah. Amazon Prime, should I say? But I'm finding that a lot of people have got either got Amazon Prime themselves or their family members have got it. And if you buy an Amazon product now, it comes with that built in, and it's very easy to set up. You don't even need to go on your phone. You can do it by voice. So I think it's really, really great, actually. For anybody that's interested, I've done a little like magazine article and a podcast that explains all about Alexa Plus.
Do you want to put the link in the chat?
I'll put it in the chat. Yeah, good idea.
Cheers, Jason. I just got a comment from Ralph from Galloway. He's just mentioning they've had a lot of success with smart tech like the Alexa devices and smart glasses. And I think yeah, just we're going to concentrate on Apple and Android, their phones and technology in these sessions, but it's a big, huge area and subject. So if these pilots are successful, the hope would be when you expand, you can then start to dip our toes into talking about and teaching about different bits of smart technology. But I think just to summarize what we're getting from the Q&As is how important it is to have a network of people that you talk to about these things, isn't it? Because you've only got as much knowledge as you have and as much experience that you have, but because we're all working and supporting with people who are blind and visually impaired, we're all getting bits of experience and bits of knowledge, and it's great to talk to each other and share that. So whenever you get those opportunities, please do so. Has anybody got anything else before we finish up? Anything from Jamie, Richard, or Matthew?
Well, I disappeared off camera as Matthew was talking just to go and get the Hable.
Oh,
I
yes.
don't know if you can see it on the screen. That's it there. It's about the size of actually, it's probably smaller than a smartphone now. And it's just got some very simple buttons on it.
Yeah. That's like a physical input device, isn't it, Jamie? So,
yeah.
Does that speak as well, Jamie, when you
No,
type?
it's entirely a Bluetooth connection to your phone. And when you're using VoiceOver on your phone, you're able to use the Braille input to control your phone. So that remote controls your phone, and you could type and text with Braille, and you can navigate round about. And like, for instance, you hold down H, which is here I'm getting tested here. 4, 5, and 2 for H for Braille, and you hold that down, it'll take you to the home screen. So there's like shortcuts and stuff. So for a Braille user, it's really good.
So I should just say, although the Hable doesn't speak, the phone still does. So that's how that works. So you would, if you were new to Braille, you could set your phone to read every letter as you type it, and then as you type the letter H on the Hable, then the phone will say H, and then you type a letter E on the Hable and the phone will say E, and so on. So you can get speech output, but it's speech output through the phone and not through the Hable itself.
And
Okay.
people are learning Braille again from, by picking up a Hable and using their phone.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, cheers for that. Right, should we wrap up now? It's we've been going about an hour and 25. I think the four of us were slightly worried at the start of the session it would last about 10 minutes, but that was never going to happen because it's such a big subject. So yeah, so our next session is, well, a week today at 10 o'clock, and I think we're concentrating on iOS and an iPhone next week, and how we use that with people who are blind and people who have some useful vision. So that'll be really good. Yeah. So just finishing off now. Make sure you have a little break after the session. Go sit in the garden or go for a walk to help you absorb the information you've got today. Take an early lunch. That's what I'm recommending you do.
Sit in the shade.
Just sit in the shade. Yeah. Tell your line managers, etc. Andrew said it was all right to have an early lunch. So please do that. Please do that, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Yeah. So take care, everybody.
See you guys. Thank you.